I call the Aleppo Township Commissioners meeting of November 15th, 2021 to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Art.
Good evening. Roll call, please.
President Jones.
Present.
Vice President Williams.
Present.
Commissioner Dara.
Present.
Commissioner Richard.
Present.
Commissioner Haluka. Present. Solicitor Stone.
Here.
Manager Patterson. Here.
This meeting, as all meetings, is recorded, uploaded to YouTube, and can be watched anywhere, anytime, anyplace. Do I hear a motion to approve the November 8th workshop meeting minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
There is.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Presentation of the 2020 audit by Mr. Mark Tremblay.
Thank you, board members, for having me here this evening. I've put in front of you a couple pieces of correspondence. One is the actual thick audit report itself for calendar year 2020. And then inside that document are two loose pieces of correspondence, one of which is going to be the focal point of my presentation tonight. That's the one that has general fund balance analysis. Just a couple points about the thick audit report before I go into that shorter synopsis. This year, as we have in the past, we've issued what is known as an unmodified opinion in the audit report of the township. And basically that means that the information contained in the body of the thick audit report is presented in conformity with the rules and regulations of our profession, and there are no departures from that. So as I like to tell the board each year, that's a good thing. That's a type of opinion you want to have when your audit is disseminated to any third party requesting a copy of your audit and the DCE, any rating agency as well. That independent auditor's opinion is in the very front of the report. Subsequent to that, and this is the only other page I'll just want to discuss briefly, or pages, there's a section called the management discussion and analysis. And it runs on Roman numeral pages 4 through 13, I believe. And I always encourage my board members, I know you have a lot of information to read. I was a former board member myself, so I know you're inundated with a lot of paperwork. But that section of the audit report in the front is a good synopsis for the third-party reader of how the township did for the year, not only the current year, but also shows comparative information 2020 versus 2019. So again, it's a good quick read without necessarily having to go through all the nuts and bolts of the audit report to see how the township did for the year. Now, turning your attention to this short 3-page synopsis, what I did, as I usually do for the board, is pull out the highlights, the financial numbers I think of most importance for the board, and let's discuss these, see how you did not only for 20, but I give you a look back over a 5-year period to see how the township did. If you look at the first page, you see the most important fund of the township, which is the general fund. And you can see that table, 5 years of your overall fund balance, your total fund balance of the general fund itself. So as you can read the tables clearly, you can see at the end of 2020, you ended with a total fund balance of $1,291,000. About $115,000, $116,000 increase from last year, a little almost 10%. Now in that paragraph below that, it's an important paragraph in as much as it tells you a little bit about your fund balance and how that's looked at through certain agencies who try to determine what a good fund balance is for any organization, any governmental organization. In our profession, there's an organization known as the Government Finance Officers Association. And they have determined that what you should shoot for, ideally, is to have what is known as an unassigned fund balance that is a certain percentage of your budget. And they calculate it based on average expenditures over a 2-month period. So in that paragraph, I do the math for you. Total general fund expenditures for the township were $1,225,000. So on average, when I take 2 months of that, that's about $204,000 worth of expenditures that your unassigned fund balance should be at the end of the year. Well, at the Township of Aleppo, your unassigned fund balance is $1,103,000. So you well exceed their recommended threshold. That's not necessarily a good thing, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just an objective measure that our industry provides to governments, probably more so for those organizations that may be below that threshold, just as an idea of where you want to be more fiscally healthy than you might otherwise be. The reason I talk about overall fund balance, this $1,291,000, and then tell you about your unassigned fund balance is because there's a little portion, the difference between the unassigned amount of $1,103,000 and this 1,2. There's a small amount of monies that are set aside for certain reserves and expenses for next year. They're restricted for those purposes, and therefore the remaining portion of your net position, your fund balance, is available to be used for overall general operations. When you turn to the top of page 2, I just remind the board, in addition to just the first bullet point there, is in addition to your general fund, you also have some other pots of money in the debt service fund and the capital improvements fund. And for the year ended December 31st, 2020, you ended the year with $816,000 in that capital improvement fund, that other pot of money that the township manages, in addition to a number of smaller funds like the liquid fuels fund, things of that nature. Also on page 2, again going back to the general fund, a 5-year history of your revenues and expenditures. And again, self-explanatory in terms of increases and decreases in the percentages. I note at the bottom of those two tables, though, just for the board's consideration, you can see fluctuations in these revenues and expenditures and wonder, oh boy, I thought we were fairly consistent from year to year. On your general revenues and on your general expenditures, you are. But at times, the board makes decisions to transfer money from its general fund into its capital improvement fund, which is a prudent move. Sometimes those transfers are much larger than they are in a prior year, and therefore you'll see these various swings in expenditures. Sometimes that money is transferred back to the general fund if needed, or to reimburse for certain projects. So when you see these swings in revenues and expenditures, it's not necessarily in your standard revenue items like taxes and items that you receive normally. It's more from the transfers in and out of the funds to fund certain projects that the township is doing. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention with regard to your general fund revenues and expenditures. On the top of the last page, just to show the board how you did budget versus actual. As you know, each year you're required to have a budget, and for the 2020 year, I have 2 bullet points that tell you a little bit about your budget up top. First bullet point dealing with revenues. General fund revenues, actual revenues for 2020 exceeded budget by about $125,000. The 2 main areas where you were over budget, the 2 main areas were real estate transfer taxes, which exceeded budget by about $46,000. Real estate transfer taxes are very volatile. It's very tough to budget those type monies because you don't know when there's going to be transfers of sales of property that create this type of revenue. So that's not unexpected. And also intergovernmental revenues, you received CARES Act funds in the 2020 year of almost $40,000. And naturally, at the beginning of the year, you wouldn't have known that you were going to receive those monies, so they were unbudgeted. So those were the 2 main sources that caused you to be over budget in terms of your actual revenues by $125,000. The second bullet point talks about expenditures. Budgeted expenditures exceeded actual by about $158,000. Obviously, that's where you want to be. You want to be under budget if at all possible. And I just note the 2 main areas where you were under budget in terms of expenditures. Public Works Sewers was under budget by about $68,000, and the main culprit there, if you will, was you had a budgetary line item, MS4, that was the main item there that was under budget. And then in the Public Works Highways, you had some categories for street repairs, capital construction, and equipment purchases that were well under budget, almost $62,000 for the year. So those were the main areas in general fund expenditures where you were under budget, actual expenditures under your budget. So I show you a table where here are the four main functional areas, expenditure areas at the township, and how you did budget versus actual. You can see there are minor overages in the general government and public safety area, not much at all. And then, as we just talked about with public works, sewers, and highways, well under budget, 162,000. So again, just calling that to your attention. In the back of that thick audit report, just for the sake of the board, it starts on page 38 and runs through page 43. Are detail line item budget versus actual amounts for both revenues and expenditures. What I've presented to you here is more in summary fashion, so you can get an idea, a quick idea of the overall picture of how you did budget versus actual. But when you turn to those pages in the detail audit report, you'll see a greater level, line item by line item, how you did when you were doing your budget. Revenues first, in the first two pages, 38 and 39, and then lastly, pages 40 through 43 are your expenditures, line item by line item. And you, once again, you can see how you did as a learning tool, not only for reviewing the past, but also for budgeting purposes going forward wherever it applies. So I think for the most part, those are the highlights from the audit report itself. If the board has any questions with regard to what we talked, and I know you're somewhat at a disadvantage because you're looking at this stuff for the first time, but if you have general questions that maybe I can answer, I'd be more than happy to answer them at this time.
I think as we discussed, Mark, on italicized page 3, where you see net position, the unrestricted net position, and the fund balance.
Yes.
Could you explain a bit about the net position calculation?
Well, and we were talking about this briefly before the meeting, is how this all comes into play with regard to the budgeting process and the carryover of monies when you're planning your budget from one year to the next. There are two important things to remember, and this can be somewhat confusing to those who don't have a vast background in finances with regard to why the government world decided to do this. But so many years ago, they required basically what I call two sets of financial statements within one report. Well, Mark, how is this? Well, you budget for annually on a short-term basis, what's known as the modified accrual basis. You budget for that year only. You're looking at each year individually, budget versus actual, what's going to come in and go out. But our industry decided a while back, not only do we want that information included in the audit report, and by the way, that's the information we've just been talking about with regard to the general fund, but they also want to take more like a corporate view, a consolidated balance sheet where they add all of your funds into the pot and also add in long-term liabilities, long-term fixed assets that the township owns, to take a look at your overall fiscal health. When you do that consolidated balance sheet, the term they use is net position rather than fund balance. And keep in mind that net position figure, which for 2020 includes fixed assets, long-term debt, items that you don't see when you're doing your budget. That figure for the year, the unrestricted portion, was $2,200,000. Just wanted you to know that's a different figure than when we talked about fund balance. And the reason that's different is because, as I mentioned, it's a consolidated look. It adds in all those other funds that we weren't necessarily talking about: capital improvements fund, highway aid, all of those sort of things, your fixed assets, your buildings, your equipment, and your long-term debt, your bonds payable obligations. That is to fulfill the requirements of generally accepted accounting principles. If you remember in the very beginning of my presentation when I said that I've issued you an unmodified opinion, which is the way I started our conversation, in order to receive that type of opinion, you have to have those two sets of financial statements in your audit report. One on the short-term basis, which we talk about, budget, which we talked about tonight, and the other on the long-term basis. So just for definition purposes, just to separate those two, now we're talking about the full accrual, the consolidated look, and that net position, which is the $2 million. You don't want to use that figure in the budget process because it's not a one-year look. It's over a period of time. Again, when you think about your assets and your debt, you're not paying that all off in 1 year. So that figure should not be used during the budget process. What should be used is the unassigned fund balance that I talked about briefly. We talked about in the synopsis that I gave you, that three-page synopsis, that your fund balance, your total fund balance for the general fund was $1,291,000. But if you recall, I said there's a little bit of monies inside that total pot that are restricted for certain things. So the remaining portion, which is known as unassigned and available for general operations, is $1,103,000. So for the sake of argument, tonight, $1.1 million of unassigned general fund balance. Now, for this year, 2020, you had excess revenues over expenditures of $115,741. That excess, just for 2020, that's all that was for. That ends up being added to that unassigned pot of unassigned fund balance that has been accumulating over the years to get to the figure at the end of 12/31/20, which is $1,100,000 roughly. So understand that the $115,000 was just 2020's activity. That money gets added into prior year's excesses to arrive at this 1.1 million. That 1.1 million of unassigned fund balance is really what is known as the carryover amount of fund balance that can be used to balance your next year's budget. Not that you would ever need in one particular year that full 1.1 million, but it's available. So when you're doing your budget on an annual basis, you may be able to have a balanced budget without touching any of this unassigned fund balance of 1.1 million. You may have 1.2 in revenues that you can come up with and 1.2 in expenditures, and you won't even have to look at these carryover funds. But they're available. So if you were going to 2022, for instance, and let's say we're planning for $1.5 million in expenditures, but based on the economy, based on the pandemic, we can only come up with $1 million of revenues. Well, you have a shortfall there of $500,000. So it's good to know that you have this carryover of 1.1 that you can use 500,000 of to balance your calendar year 2022 budget. So that's the way to look at it. So that 1.1 is a good, healthy, unassigned amount to be able to carry over based on the size of your annual budget from year to year.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for our auditor? I think that was very clear.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Chief?
Good evening, everyone. For the month of October, again, relatively quiet month, they total 61 calls, several alarms to residences, businesses. We had a few fire alarms, 40 EMS assist the ambulance. Yeah, it was a little higher this year, or this month, excuse me. A few animal complaints and traffic citations, just a few this month. Nothing of note to affect the general public. Any questions or issues, concerns for me?
Chief, do you respond by default to all EMS
We
dispatches?
We do, unless there is a higher medical care there. Like some of these, many of these are at Masonic Village's cared facility, right? So they have a higher care than what we can do.
But you dispatch at the same time that
We
EMS
get dispatched,
dispatch? Okay.
correct, the same time that EMS does. And oftentimes the EMS does say, hey, we need a lift assist, or we would like some type of assistance, and we proceed to help them with those, yes. Anything else?
Well, every meeting question, is there anything we can do to improve your job?
No, everything's fantastic. Everything's going very, very well. Always.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief, be safe.
Energy management? Emergency management, sorry, energy.
Either
Wow.
I was
one.
gonna say, I manage my energy pretty well, but, we're status quo. Everything's going well, no big changes at Masonic, no big changes in the township. I just looked at the numbers an hour ago.
Okay,
So far, so good.
any questions for Commissioner Haluka? Public Works. Tim, even though we all know, would you please introduce yourself?
Tim Scott, Public Works Department. You all have copies of everything, but I just want everybody to know our salt spreaders and our snow plows are ready to go. And we have a loaded building, so we got plenty of salt. We're ready to
Oh, that hurts my heart.
Boo.
take care of it. Our main thing lately has been problems with leaves, blocking catch basins, things like that. We've been doing a lot of leaf cleanup. We had the election in the garage, and we've put the garage all back together. I know we talked last month about we were having problems with our riding tractor. It's getting to the point where we need to replace it, and I discussed with Gwen about replacing it, and I gave her some options on what we were looking at. And I don't know, should we go any further?
So, this is to replace the existing riding mower that's, he's trying to like manufacture parts for at this point, like they crafted their own part for this. So, it needs to be replaced, and he's gotten one quote for a replacement model that he's interested in. We checked on it appears that it's gonna be coming a little under 11,500. And the bid thresholds for 2021, it says that the minimum purchase amount for telephone quotes would be anything over 11,500. So he's gonna might get a couple quotes just to be safe, but he's underneath the threshold for that.
Good.
So, but it doesn't hurt to get a couple quotes, so if that is, he'll get those, and then if the board could vote, because it's a larger expenditure, and we have a policy that we need to have a little bit of time between any discussion and a vote on anything over $10,000. So this would be on the approval to buy this piece of equipment will be on the December workshop agenda, just so he can get it ordered by the end of the year. So
Good.
it'll be on the agenda for the next meeting.
Any questions for me?
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Communications.
I didn't have anything come to me. If there's anything outstanding, Gwen, that I would.
Certainly not from, on the Amazon perspective, you
Yeah.
know, everything, you know, we have the sign and, you know, we're good on that. We did receive one email from a resident with some comments about, last week's meeting, and we've addressed that. So there was just some comments about questions about some of the discussion that was had about the emergency exit and a couple other topics, and so hopefully I was able to answer those questions that the resident had.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Planning and zoning.
No report.
Tax collector treasurer.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
You should have your October report in your packet for the month of October. Total taxes collected was $13,972.01. Pages 3 and 4 again show the graphs of comparing October 2021 to 2020. That, and then obviously the year-to-date budget, we are currently over, as you can see a little bit. Right now, we have 2 months still to go. So we'll see how the remainder of the year plays out. A lot less comes in over the next 2 months or so, but we're still in good financial position for the month, or for the budget year. So we're doing that. Then I gave you your total account balances. So the PNC checking account has $570,729.86. And then we have our Pliget investment accounts. You have the state fund at $66,584.74. The general investment savings account at $964,490.60. The reserve fund at $112,707.62. And then the capital improvement of $899, $805, and 29 cents. So total monies on hand is roughly $2,614,318.11. However, subtracting out pledged funds, targeted funds, our net operating funds right now is $1,535,220.46. And then I obviously gave you the sewer bond account. We have closed out the sewer capital account over the last 2 months. However, we now have a new stormwater investment account with a new balance of $147,343.25. So I just wanted to point that out. Any questions?
No?
Yeah.
Gwen, do we want to discuss the 2022 budget now?
I have it on a little bit later, but it doesn't matter. But we need, before we move away from Clayton, we have to get this motion to exonerate him for the collection of taxes. It's something our insurance requires.
Move that we exonerate Clayton Stoop for collection of taxes for years 2019 and 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations.
You're exonerated. You're exonerated. I'm legal again, hold on.
Can I have a vote like that too?
You are forgiven.
Do I hear a motion to approve the October bill list, et cetera?
Move to approve October bill list in the amount of $54,633.97. To ratify the October prepaid bills in the amount of $14,253.82. And to ratify October payroll transfers in the amount of $15,850.85.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Aleppo Township Authority.
A couple of brief matters to report. Masonic has advised the authority that the lead order time on the tools necessary for the grinder pump is 18 to 20 weeks.
Wow.
So nothing's going to be happening on that project for a while. Dave Kirshner reported that the DEP has approved our Act 537 amendment, waiting for a response from Allegheny County before it goes out for public comment. Finally, the Kilbuck Run sewer study that we talked about at the last meeting, the authority authorized the engineer to present that study to representatives of Glenfield and Swickley Hills since they helped fund the study.
Do you know when that's going to occur?
I don't.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Any questions for Commissioner Darrow? Thank you. Quaker Valley Ambulance Authority.
No report.
Quaker Valley COG.
Well, we had the annual dinner, which went out very, very well, and I want to bring to attention the tone of the meetings that are going exceedingly well, in my opinion. There's a lot more discussion about the possibility of getting grants, and the grants that are available are larger quantities than I've been accustomed to hearing from the COG. So I think that our new leader over there is coming at it from a more businesslike tone and giving some leadership. Every one of his reports or letters starts out with about the team and leadership, and trying to get the people to look at these monies from the states and other sources of revenues a lot more, taken more seriously. And so I'm very positive about that, although it's pretty young in the term. It's better than not having young in the term. Other than that, I think I want to thank Gwen. I think you went up to Masonic Village and had a presentation on sustainable.
I did, yeah. I had met with the sustainability committee resident committee at Masonic to talk about the township and its efforts for recycling and the environment and things like that. And it was a really nice meeting, I thought.
Anything else?
Okay.
Any questions for Commissioner? Do I hear a motion to retain Harlan Stone and Babs Callen, Clements, etc.?
Move that the town engage Harlan Stone and Babs Callen Clements and Zomner PC as township solicitor and to authorize the township manager to sign the appropriate authorizations.
Is there a second?
Second.
Harlan, would you please explain why this is occurring?
Sure. Last month, I was presented with an opportunity to move from my present firm, Dickey McCamey and Shilko, where I've been for the last 10 years, which is a wonderful firm, and I've had a terrific 10-year stint there, so to speak. But an opportunity arose where I could move to another firm, Babs Callen, where there was more depth in their municipal law personnel and more resources that would be available to me and my clients, more importantly, for the work that I do. And so I accepted that offer and took advantage of that opportunity, and I would ask that the board approve and appoint my new firm as the solicitor, me and the new firm as the solicitor. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Solicitor Stone?
And I also want to express my gratitude to the board for the 10 years that I've been here, and note that even before that, my father had spent a good 20 years as your solicitor, and it is a source of some personal pride to me to be able to have served you for so long, and I hope that I'll be able to continue giving you that type of service.
Thank you, sir.
Need a second.
All in favor? Didn't we have a second?
Art, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Hi, welcome,
After
Art.
30 years, we're still standing.
Unfinished business, 2022 budget.
All right, so, what I'll be handing out, take one pass right now, is the draft, it'll say second draft on it because that's the second working draft that I've worked on. So this is the draft of the 2022 budget. I've worked on it with George, and Clay has also reviewed the first draft for us. And what you have coming to you is the memo that's explaining some of the highlights, kind of like Mark Turnley's letter. It's the highlights and then the details are in the back. So it's the memo explaining the changes and the updates for 2022. And then you have a summary page that lists just the major categories, and then you have the detail pages at the back. So I can go through a couple of the high points of the budget here. Property tax revenues are going to go up a little bit. We had a good year for property tax, so we've increased that revenue a little bit. Earned income tax is up a little bit. We've seen a little bit of a dip in the collections in the second part of the year, and I think we're going to be on track, but it slows down at this time of year. We will get maybe another chunk, but that won't show up till the next year. So we're close to steady on that one. Local services taxes, that went up a bit, and then that has slowed down also. We think local services tax is a tax that anyone who works in Aleppo Township pays to the township, and it goes to offset the costs for fire, EMS, police, protection services like that. We have an agreement in place, a resolution in place to give 1/3 of that directly to the fire company. So any local services tax we collect, we automatically give 1/3 to the fire company, and the rest is used to offset our police, usually our police costs. That went up a bit, and that slowed a bit, and we're not 100% sure, but we think it might have something to do with the number of Amazon drivers that are stationed here. Because it went up, right when Amazon opened, it went up, and then it slowed because we know that this warehouse here is not as fully staffed with the same number of teams that it was in the past. So that's kind of one that just goes a little bit like this, so I don't want to get too aggressive in budgeting in revenue for that, because it's a little unpredictable. Interest earnings are terrible. and they're just terrible. We're gonna be under budget, and I budgeted a very small amount for the next year. Transfer from other funds, as you heard Mark talk about the carryover, the leftover from 2020. While this is gonna go all the way into 2022, because the timing of the audits, we had 115,741 in unspent funds from 2020 that we take and put into the following, the upcoming year's budget. So that has been put in as a revenue to offset some of our expenses for 2022. There are a couple lines on the budget that have, if you look on your budget document, it'll have some X's and it's highlighted sections. There's a section in the revenue and a section in the expense. Those are things where if we end up buying another large piece of equipment, or before the end of the year make a decision to do that, or make a decision on some paving, you'll see numbers show up in those two boxes, but they will be offsetting numbers because any spending would come from the savings that we have allocated for that. So while those are empty right now, if the numbers fill in, they'll be offsetting equal numbers. As far as expenses go, legal fees are on pace. We have a lot of reimbursable legal fees in the last couple of years, legal and engineering fees, which means review fees that we then pass on to a developer or someone seeking that advice. So we broke that out 2 years ago, so it was better reflected legal fees that the township pays and the ones that we are reimbursed for. So that's clearer now. In past years, it looked like we were over budget on those, but it wasn't. It was reimbursable stuff. Health insurance premiums went up 5.5% increase, and that's the same as last year. We do have $25,000 budgeted in the building category for the potential replacement of the sewer line underneath the township building. Said sewer line runs directly underneath my office, so if we need to replace that, I will be temporarily relocated to another spot in the building while they dug up my office and then fixed it, and I would get put back. So
But you have experience, you should do that.
I'm doing things like this at home. So yes, it's just been a jackhammer kind of year. So that's a potential. We're looking into that. We've had a couple decent repairs and some backups. So we want to try to tackle it before it emerges in my office, shall we say. Capital outlay on here, this is also, I talk about it on the revenue side and the expense side, those two line items that have the X's where they would offset if we chose to do anything in those. We are continuing the annual truck fund allocation where we budget $23,000 for trucks and $4,000 for equipment, just so that we have a fund that when time comes to buy a new truck or a large piece of equipment, we don't have to borrow for it, we just have the money set aside. And at this time, there's no big paving projects planned for 2022. We are continuing to save. Right now, the amount we have budgeted to save for paving is $51,577. If we, find more money before the end of the year, that allocation might increase. But we're continuing to save for paving even in the years that we don't do any work, because that way when we need work, we have it there. And you heard Mark say that our capital improvements fund, which is what we consider the paving fund, has some money in it, so when the next round of paving comes, we'll have some set aside for it.
Is there a report from the corings that were done and
I don't have it yet, not the one in the ridge, I don't have the report yet. I think that they were done, but I don't have the
they were
report yet.
done? I saw them doing it.
You did see them doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
The ones on roads.
those are definitely done. We're waiting for the report from the HRG subcontracted geotech person to write the written report explaining any recommendations. So they're done, we just don't have the recommendation report yet. So that's kind of why a couple of these line items have the blank X's, because we just waiting for a few more pieces of information that we hope to get by the end of the year, to then maybe plug a number in there. So those are the highlights. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, you're just getting it tonight, so feel free to look it over. The intent would be for this to be adopted, it has to be adopted by the end of the year, so we would have it it needs to be advertised. We'll have it on the agenda for the December legislative meeting to adopt the ordinances that set the millage rate and adopt the budget, 2 separate ordinances.
So kind of a general comment, 10 years ago or so, reserves were very inadequate. And there were a variety of reasons for that. We did a 20-year road study, we did an analysis of the reserves for vehicles, etc. And now we've been faced with starting to establish a reserve fund for stormwater, which is kind of a new regulatory requirement. The Finance Committee recognizes that our general fund is far in excess of the industry standard, the 2-month versus what we have. And so every once in a while, we slowly move some money from the general fund, or we use all of the last year's portion of the carryover to enhance those reserve funds. This year, we're not doing that. It's partially because the one reserve fund that we are not funding to the level of the formula is capital improvements. Because the capital improvements fund has not been spent at the pace that we anticipated. So I don't feel too badly about it, but if we had a situation that needed cash, we know it's there in the general fund. And then we have been getting government money from time to time, which is unanticipated. We may have another chunk of government money coming in May, and that could also go into the capital improvements fund or the stormwater fund, which is kind of a new reserve. So we recognize the issue. We're happy that it's there. We've had no need to draw down the general fund significantly, so we don't. Any other comments or questions on the preliminary budget? Okay.
All right, let me know if you have anything, and I'll continue to prepare to adopt it next month.
Thank you, Gwen.
New business?
That's good.
Dave, is there any citizen participation?
No.
Clayton, as a citizen in the outskirts there, any participation?
All good, thank you.
He's exonerated, he's not saying that.
Yeah, he just goes,
I'm gonna be quiet.
Exactly, the last meeting we were at, we needed exonerated.
Mr. Solicitor, any need for an executive session?
No, Mr. President.
Therefore, meeting adjourned.